just don't get it. And I find that it's used against me when someone in the community doesn't like something I'm saying and doesn't agree with something I'm saying. They'll turn around and they'll call me a self-hating queer. And I find that interesting because I think one of the most self-hating things you can do is refer to yourself as something that's been used against you as a slur. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. All my extraordinary free thinkers, or EFTs as I like to call you. Today I want to talk about the word queer.
What is the definition of the word queer?
Queer? I don't know. It's so broad.
Can you define the word queer? What does the word queer mean?
Queer is like experimenting with any part of your sexuality, and it's just being anything other than like what schools teach you.
I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I'd like to hear your opinion as well. You know, you see it a lot in the mainstream now. It's kind of everywhere. It's even on TV, the word queer, and it's a lot of woke activists use it like crazy, used as a descriptor or an umbrella term for everybody. And I just want to get your thoughts about it because I have some things to say. You know, you've got queer community, queer people, queer bodies, queer identity, queer politics, queer theory. And it's like, which is kind of a slippery slope if you ask me, if you look into the origins of queer theory. It has a lot of negative connotation that was used back in the day against gays and lesbian people, you know, for generations. It really was. It was used to degrade people, to dehumanize them. You're queer, you know, that kind of thing. And at some point, activists in the 80s and 90s kind of took the word back and started using it, taking ownership of it or what have you during parades or protests. And they chanted things like, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." And kind of giving the middle finger back at the bigots and the ultra-right conservative Christians for using that term against them in the first place. And all that is well and good, and I totally get it, you know? And I think at one point in my life, I probably would have been like, yeah, really on board with that. And it actually is true. I actually pulled out this book. I think I used it in a Buck Angel video that I did with him.
So I had a bunch of stuff shipped out here from New York. And I had this old book from school, from high school, called Is It a Choice? And
wow,
there are the definitions in there. This was the last copyright on this is 1999.
I've had this book my entire life, practically, since I was a teenager. I'm starting to date myself a little bit, but it has been updated since then. I don't know what the updated version looks like, but I was curious and I looked it up. And I was like, I wonder what it says in here about the word queer. And it says, plenty of gay and lesbian people are puzzled by this one as well. Beginning in the early 1990s, some gay and lesbian people, particularly college students, and the more politically radical, chose to use the word queer to identify themselves because they felt it was more inclusive than gay and lesbian. This is so funny because it kind of sounds like current day. You know, like you would have thought this was written yesterday, and it totally wasn't. They felt that by reclaiming a word that had been used by those who hate gay people, they stripped it of its original hurtful intent and transformed it into something positive. According to one woman I interviewed who was in her mid-20s at the time, quote, "While some people find this word offensive, many of us find it liberating because it's a word that embraces us all. We use it as a word of pride, of inclusion, and of community. The word reflects the painful reality that regardless of how we identify ourselves, we are all outside the heterosexual majority, and we all suffer prejudice, discrimination, hatred, ignorance from the majority of the population." Now, this last part, the words reflects the painful reality that regardless of how we identify ourselves, we are all outside the heterosexual majority. Why do you want to be reminded of the painful reality all the time? Like, that part is what I don't understand. Like, I don't get that. Like, why do you want to be reminded of that? And current day, that we are not all suffering from prejudice, discrimination, hatred, and ignorance. the way we were even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. You know, things have changed a lot, and we have changed the minds of a lot of people. These newer kids, they're born into a world where getting married is legal. Two gay people getting married is legal. I remember a time when it wasn't legal. I remember a time where you could get fired for being gay. You know, there are things that have gone on that the younger people today don't have to deal with. So I kind of feel like the younger generation today is still kind of living in this, or they think they're supposed to live in this, when we've moved on from a lot of the problems that we used to have. So then it says here, after enjoying some popularity for several years, the word queer is now used mostly in an academic context, as in, quote, queer studies. Okay, so it faded into obscurity again and was used only academically, but now it's back in the mainstream again, right? Like, I'm not really sure what the point is, or like why it needs to be normalized again. And, you know, some people today that are identifying as queer, they're not even gay. They're straight, and they're like in this whole like political, woke, ideological sphere. And it's almost cool to be queer and to like put it in your Instagram profile or throw the term around. Yeah, we're queer. It's this umbrella term that like I'm not really that comfortable with. Like, I just don't get it. And I find that it's used against me when someone in the community doesn't like something I'm saying and doesn't agree with something I'm saying. They'll turn around and they'll call me a self-hating queer. And I find that interesting, because I think one of the most self-hating things you can do is refer to yourself as something that's been used against you as a slur. And these are some of the same people that are demanding that we respect their pronouns, respect their personal identities, and yet they can say whatever they want and use whatever labels they feel like on other people. So you can label me, you can put me in a box, you can say whatever you want about me, but I can't dare I say anything about you. Somehow I'm against my own community, so to speak, right? Because I don't want to participate with the usage of that language. And not that I'm somebody that is into this whole collectivism thing anyways. I've never really been a fan of being part of this community. And I guess by default, I just am, because I'm gay. And it's not to say that it was never something I wasn't a part of, because I think when I was a younger person, it weighed more heavily in my life and it was a bigger part of my identity than I see it now, because I've experienced life and I see things through a different lens, and I've realized that there's so much more to a person, obviously, than being gay. Yet I'm finding that people make being queer their entire personality. So anyways, back to the whole queer thing. So I found it really interesting that it was in this book and it was talked about in this way, like that, hey, yeah, it was used as a term that they were taking back and taking ownership of, but then it kind of faded out. But what's funny is that today it's back again and it's everywhere. And I'm just not all that excited about it. And I think it's a weird term. And I think that there's a lot of people that aren't using that term that don't appreciate it either. I've seen it in comment sections. I've seen it with people that reach out to me directly that talk about how they don't really like that term and they don't understand why it's being used again. And I quite frankly don't understand why it's being used again either. And I wish that it wasn't. I wish it was just something that would just go away. I feel that some of these people in the newer generation feel empowerment by using that term. And they almost use it as a weapon. Like I was saying, like they'll use it against me because, you know, there's certain things that I don't agree with some of these people on, you know, and I'm like, it doesn't hold the weight that I think these people think that it holds. You know, and I want to say too that I think that some people think too deeply about this stuff. They look at it and they think it has some sophisticated reality that they're sort of getting lost in, and they're explaining to people, you know, I'm queer. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So if you just, Google queer and queer theory, let's say, it says, at its core, queer theory relates to queer people, their lived experience, and how their lived experience is culturally and or politically perceived, specifically referring to the marginalization of queer people. This thinking is then applied to various fields of thinking. This is a Wikipedia thing. And by the way, specifically referring to the marginalization of queer people, why is everything always about victimhood? It's always about how you're marginalized, you're oppressed, you're victimized. I don't understand it because the last time I felt victimized for being a lesbian was a very long time ago. And maybe I'm just going to be told that I'm privileged or whatever, because whenever I say anything like this, that's what I get. I'm a sellout, I'm privileged, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's been a very long time since I've felt marginalized as being lesbian, and it has happened, and I have felt that way in my life, but it's mostly in the past. And you also have to sort of pick and choose your battles here. Like, not everybody's going to like you all the time. Not everybody's going to think you're awesome. There will always be people who don't understand you, who don't like you for being gay, and it's something that you have to deal with. It doesn't mean that you go out and play victim every moment of the day. We need to lift ourselves up, I think, more at this point and look at all that we've accomplished. Gay marriage, all of our rights that we have now that we didn't before. People were running scared. You had to hide back in the day what your sexual orientation was. You could not tell people that you were gay. You were risking getting the crap beaten out of you. You were risking getting fired from your job for being gay. You were risking so much. But it was a cultural norm to be a total a-hole to gay people. It is. We know we've won, guys, and you know that we are powerful as a community at this point now because corporations are sponsoring LGBT anything and everything. There you have it. Using that term and identifying with that term, to me, is partially rooted in being a victim. Like, let's get out of that space. I don't like it. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's healthy. Why are we so unhealthy in this community? And we insist on perpetuating this stuff. I don't want to be a part of that. I'm personally not going to embrace the term queer and use it for myself. I don't like it. I think it's negative. I think it's rooted in victimhood. I'm not up for that. I'm not cool with that. If other people want to use it for themselves and that's what they like and they're comfortable with, that's their business. But don't put it back on me. Don't call me queer. That is not me. I don't like being called that term. I think it's a negative thing that shouldn't be used in the community the way that it is today.